Hi, so we're back, and this time I'd like to share a little bit about how to create the effect of HDR in Photopia. So, Photopia is an app that I've been using with my classes as much as I can. It's open source. I like to call it Photoshop because it's quite like it, very similar. So here you'll see on my screen is a HDR effect that I've applied, or as close as HDR as I can simulate at this moment. And it's of a guy riding motocross. And I'll give credit to the source, and the source is from Pexels, and it's a guy named Daniel. And I don't know, the image jumped out at me because it's got lots of dirt in the background. And I've been asked by students, excuse me, I've been asked that how to create HDR effect. And we've been talking about color and photography. And so here on the screen is effects in HDR and what other artists have done and posted across the web. And so Google has examples here that we're scrolling through. Anyways, it's vivid light. So what I thought I could share with you today is how to convert this image from a nice looking image with decent color, but give it that extra pop. So as you see, I turned off these extra channels here, I'll call them. I have blue, red, and green, and I've mixed them to a overlay layer. So when I turn those back on, notice how the image changes. And with each layer, I'm able to create this HDR effect. Now you can go crazy with it with lots of pop, lots of color, or make it a little more subtle. That'll be up to the artist, up to you. And each layer here, I can adjust the opacity and go up or down, and it'll affect the image. So I'm just playing with the blues. So if I crank that up, I get a little bit more blues. It becomes more vibrant. I could adjust my brightness and contrast. But in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do it from scratch. So I will turn all of these off. And if you're in my class, you will be provided a file with this image and follow these steps. Otherwise, I could provide a link in this YouTube channel and others could follow me. So it's a Photoshop file, and in fact, it's called HDR Action Bike Rider. So first step here is I've turned off every one of those layers, the blue, red, green, and the brightness and contrast. So I'm going to right click on my background layer and duplicate it. So I've got a duplicate layer. I'm going to drag that all the way to the top here. And from here, I'm going to add, I'm going to do it here. I'm going to go here, a new adjustment layer, and I want to find curves. So I go to curves. You'll get this little pop-up window for curves, and you want to play with the channels here. So every image is composed of RGB, red, green, blue. So we're going to make a red version first, and I'm going to click here and really pump up the reds in here. There's another cool way to do it. You can actually do the sketch mode, which you can just click and drag, and it'll make a graph of your sketch. I've been used to using the spline mode, and you click and drag and it creates a curve. You can multiple click with multiple nodes here. So that's a nice red layer. I'm going to then go over to the word here where it says curves and type in red. Okay, from here, I'm going to merge those two layers. So what I just did there was click on the red layer, the curved layer, and then click on the background layer, right click, and merge those two layers. I now have a red layer that's isolated. It's its own layer. So I can then apply a overlay, and I'd be ready to edit that one. So basically that's my technique. I just do it with each color. I do that with blue, red, and green. So I'm going to move on and keep going. I'm going to go back to my background layer, duplicate it, drag that to the top. Okay. Sometimes they're tricky. You gotta, especially I find in Photopia, it's tricky to drag these layers. You get the knack for it. Have the patience. Just watch for the little black line and you can place them. Background layer, same thing. I go to my adjustment layer, make a new adjustment layer, click on curves. Now instead of red, I'm going to select green. And I'm going to do a very similar curve. And play around with this. Don't be afraid to mess it up because you can always edit it. So see here how severe those changes are. I don't want it to be that much, but please do experiment. There's no science to this. I'm just experimenting with some photo editing and colors and sharing it with you. So let's say I'm happy with this. Okay, double click on this. We'll call this green. Click on there. I'm going to hold shift on my keyboard, click on the background layer just beneath it, and merge those two. And now I have a green. And while I'm at it, I'm going to convert this to overlay for a blending mode. So now these two are working together. I can turn them off for now. And one more, right click, duplicate layer, drag this up to the top. I'm going to add a layer adjustment of curves. And my last category was I have red, green, now I need blue. And I'm going to, it kind of looks purple, but again, this you decide how much you want. But I'm trying to get as many blues as I possibly can, get it as vibrant as possible. And then I'm going to play with each version. So this is kind of a funky curve here that I've got, but I like it. I'm going to stick with it. Call it blue. Hold shift or control as well. Control works. You can select multiple items and then right click, merge those two. And I now have a blue layer. So notice how the blue is prominent. And from here, I'll convert it to overlay. And I still have the original background layer, and that's helpful to have. So I'm going to turn everything off. So I have my original background. If it helps you, you can take this and drag it below the ones you just created. And then turn on the red, the green, and the blue. So all of a sudden, it's got a crazy pop to it, but it's a bit much. So click on each individual channel and you can adjust the opacity. So this is where you experiment, and this is where you can get the right look for the image. And so I'm turning it down. So the reds I would like, because there's a lot of browns in here, so I'm going to bring up the reds to about 70%. And then the green, I'm going to pump that up here because the bike is green. And the very last channel here is going to be the blue. And there's a little bit of blue in the background, so I would like to increase that. And it creates a nice purple haze or purple slash blue accents throughout the photo. And one last touch to this, make this complete. I'm going to add one last adjustment layer. It'll be a brightness and contrast. And that applies it to the entire image. So here, if I want the image to be brighter, I can adjust this. I'll just do it to show. It gets quite, it's a bit much. I'm gonna tone that down. And then, I like contrast, and I believe a lot of HDR images have a lot of contrast. And I'm looking in the dirt because the dirt's really interesting here, and the texture that's created. So I bring down my brightness. And again, all of this is experimental. So you can decide how much you want the colors to pop, or how vivid everything's going to be, how dull, how much hue there is. You're the master here at this point. So for this purpose, I'm going to call this done. And I can save this now. And I often save it as a PSD. So I click Save as PSD, and this will automatically save to your Downloads folder in Photopea. And you can therefore open it up in Photoshop, edit it there, so you've got yourself a backup. If you're done and you want to share this online or email it or just print it, then you can go File, Export as a JPEG. PDFs are great as well, but in this case, JPEG I believe I'd recommend for any use online or sharing with friends, emailing, stuff like that. You may want to compress images, make sure the image is the right size, and that you can do by going image size, and you can quickly check to see what resolution the file is at. So that's my spiel. I enjoy doing these lessons. Give me feedback if you have any, and have fun. Let's see what you can do in HDR and use this amazing website called Photopea. Thanks. See you later.